I'm quickly going to go over here in the beginning, just kind of the subscription packages, and then really quickly, if you do want to set something up, kind of the steps on how to do that. I don't want to take too much time on this for the people who are already using QuickBooks Online, but I thought this would be a good place to start. So with the subscriptions, so there's rankings, which different features with different monthly fees, obviously. I need to look into this further. Usually there's a simple start and a self-employed options as well. I don't see them as of this morning on their pricing, so I have to see if maybe they discontinued those or not. I have to look into that. But for the descriptions you see here, so I would say the main differences are the number of users and the reporting for the differences here. So for Essentials, you can have 3 users. For Plus, you can have 5. And they classify users of people who can actually go in and make changes with the books. You can have unlimited if you need some people who need to just track time, if you're using QuickBooks for time tracking or payroll, or if you need people who can go in there and run reports, those are unlimited. And also too, for accountants, for all the packages, they allow 2 accountants, and their reasoning for that is having 1 bookkeeper and 1 tax accountant. So the big differences between Essentials and Plus is that if you want to track inventory within QuickBooks Online, and if you want to run budgeting reports, those are kind of the 2 main differences. One thing I do want to point out is that there's the Manage 1099 Contractors option with Plus. If that's the only reason that you would justify switching and upgrading to Plus from Essentials, I would recommend not doing that, because there's outside apps out there that you can manage 1099 contractors for much cheaper than the extra $35, $40 would be from switching to Essentials to Plus. Yeah, so we can go ahead and get started into kind of the bulk here. So I'm going to be using a test drive QuickBooks Online account, and you can do this as well. If you just Google QuickBooks Online sample company test drive, something like that, you should be able to find this page here. And what it is a sample company that you can go in and you can make changes without having a subscription to QuickBooks Online, and you can kind of mess things up in here, and with no bad results. So especially again, the people who are using Excel or desktop, if you want to go in and kind of play around with QuickBooks Online, this is a great chance to do that. If you're already using QuickBooks Online and you learn about some new features today, and if you want to kind of play around with them before using your company file, you can do this as well. Start it here. So if you were to create a new QuickBooks Online account, I'm sorry, I have kind of a list here, what I want to go through. Before we get into that, I'm using Google Chrome. And that's always what I use to run QuickBooks Online, and that's usually what I recommend. You can, of course, use Safari, Firefox, and they also have a desktop app as well. But I think it runs best on on Google Chrome. There's a few reasons for that, and there's a lot of cool tricks you can do. So you can duplicate your window. So one great thing about QuickBooks Online is that you can run multiple windows and pages at the same time within the same file, and all those changes that you make are real time. So if you want to have a certain report open, and then while you have that report open, making changes, you can do that. If you want to drag it outside like this, you can kind of run the pages side by side. It's a lot of cool tricks you can do. Also, if you have reports that you look at pretty often, you can go ahead and get the report queued up and then add it as a bookmark, so that whenever you go and open up your Google Chrome, like a lot of people, they'll have like their P&L report here, or their balance sheet report here, or the unpaid bills report right here. So those are kind of some tricks that you can do within Google Chrome and QuickBooks Online. So I'm gonna go through really quickly some settings. I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but this is basically so you know what settings are available. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn most of the settings on, so that when I'm going through stuff, you'll be able to see all the features that are offered. So to get to your settings, there's a gearbox up here, and then you go into Accountant Settings. And a lot of the times, I do apologize in advance, the test drive is sometimes a little glitchy and slow. So bear with me with that. But the usage here shows basically, again, for the test drive, it's QuickBooks Plus. So it shows you how many users out of the 5. Chart of accounts, you have 250 chart of accounts. So it's just like a quick way to look at that. The company stuff's pretty straightforward. It has your name, EIN. You can add your logo in here, your address. This is pretty straightforward stuff. You can customize your invoices here, how they look, your preferred terms, things like that. Let's see. We're going to turn on the price rules. Price rules is basically like specials. So if you want to make, for December, all of your inventory products 20% off, you can do that. But it's a beta product as of now, but it's a pretty cool feature. So we're turning that on. Late fees, you can set up automatic late fees for your invoices. So you can say if it's, 15 days late, you can automatically charge a $15 late fee. So you can turn that option on here as well. We'll turn this on. But progress invoicing. So it's a pretty neat feature to where you can send a bulk estimate to a customer. Say it's like $1,000 over a few months of work, and then you can create partial invoices off of that. So you can charge them $250 the first month, $200 the second month, and then you can go through and always track. You can see the overall estimate and how much is paid on that as you go. Let's see, and then the expenses. So the purchase orders, that's for the inventory. So if you're tracking the inventory, and again, that's only an option that's in the plus. Let me go to advanced here. So first, a feature, again, this is also an option that's only in plus. It's not in the essentials, but you can track classes and locations within QuickBooks Online. And the way that works, so locations would be, so if you're a retail store, for example, you can track 3 different stores, and that would be your locations. And then if you also wanted to track within those stores, let's say you wanted to track, if you're a clothing company, if you wanted to track apparel, like shoes versus t-shirts of sales, you can do that through the classes, and you can use both simultaneously. You can change the label. So if it's a store, if it's a location, things like that. And then I'll show you where, if you have these on, where you can actually name the classes and locations. There's some automation stuff here. I honestly, generally say turn most of these off. I like to, so this program, you'll see, it's really smart with telling you things. So it'll still, even if you turn the automation stuff off, it'll still say, and kind of be really smart with saying, like, I think you might want to do this here, do this here. But I like getting cued and then doing it myself versus making stuff happen automatically, because that's when the program can sometimes like mess things up that way. Okay. Time tracking, if you're doing that, again, through QuickBooks Online with the payroll, and then you can change the currency and things like that. So we'll go ahead and hit okay there. Oh, one other thing I want to mention with the sample company, in the settings, there's usually a subscription setting there where you can change your billing and subscription. And there's also a payments option to where you can set up QuickBooks Online payments. Those options don't show up in the sample company, but those are probably some things too that you'll want to do, especially, and you can do it here, set up the payments. And what that allows you to do is that you put in like your bank information, give them access to it. And then when you can invoice people and collect the payment all through QuickBooks Online. If they take a fee from that, you have to look up the fees. So they have a monthly fee for that. So if you do a lot of invoices, you pay a monthly fee. I think it's $16 a month. And then the percentage that they take every single invoice is lowered. Or you can kind of do just a pay-as-you-go where you don't pay anything monthly, and then they take a little bit of a higher percentage off of that. So you can look into that versus other merchant systems. So then after you set up the payments, if you want to do that, the next step would be setting up your bank and credit card accounts. And what's really great about this with QuickBooks Online is that it automatically, once these are set up, it automatically pulls all of your transactions and puts them into QuickBooks Online every night. I think it does it. So you can set up checking accounts here, savings accounts, credit cards, loan accounts. There's a lot of stuff you can set up. You can set up your payroll here. And the way to do that is if you go to banking and then link account, it'll basically ask you to choose your bank and then put in your credentials, so your username and password, and then you'll be able to link your account that way. And so again, it's a really great feature. So you don't have to do any more of the manual entries if you're using like desktop or Excel, for example. You don't have to do anything like that, because it automatically brings everything in here. And we'll go over the bank feed a little bit more later on in more detail. And then the last step to set up after connecting your bank and credit card accounts would be setting up your taxes, which is right here. And again, QuickBooks Online automatically does this, which is great. You just basically put in your business information, what your address is, addresses of different states you might be selling to, and it'll automatically up to date keep track of those tax percentages and track everything that way. So it's really automatic, really really easy. But we can't really go through too much of this setup here. But again, you'll basically just put in your address information, things like that, and then it'll do everything automatically for you.
Hey, Gunnar,
Then,
question.
yes.
Todd has a question about the bank feeds. He says the desktop version doesn't work so well. Is the online version better than the desktop version?
Yeah. So, and thank you, Kim. I don't see it in the chat right now. So if at any point we don't have a lot of time, so I'm kind of just glossing over a lot of stuff. So if you want me to get it detailed further into anything, please let me know and I'll do that.
Okay.
But with the bank feed, so I've chosen to be an expert in QuickBooks Online. So I have zero experience with desktop. I will say that the bank feed within QuickBooks Online is probably my favorite feature of the whole program because it's so automatic and takes away all of the manual entry. But I need to look into that further because I don't have much, if any, experience with the desktop banking feed program. But I will go through a little bit later in more detail how the bank feed works and kind of make some changes within here. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you. And so so after setting up the bank feed and everything, probably the next step would be setting up users. And again, if you have the essentials, you have 3 billable users. If you have the plus, you'll have 5. And then if you go into the advanced, which is more for like medium-sized businesses, and you'll have 25 users. So in order to do that, again, this gear icon in the top right, you'll click that. And then under your company, there's the manage users right here. Sorry, if you can't really see that. And then once you're in this screen, you can hit add user right here, and you can really customize what they're able to do and not do as a user. So you can just make them standard, you can make them admin, and of course, and this is where you can do it unlimited if they want to do reports or time tracking. But if you go into standard, so you can either give them all access or you can do limited. So if you only want them to do stuff on the sales side of things where they can't make bills, they can't pay bills or anything like that, then you can do the customers here. So if you want them to be at the field, maybe creating invoices for customers, things like that, then you can do that. Same flip side. If you have someone maybe in the home office type setting to where they're not reaching out to customers and making invoices and collecting payments, but they're the ones who are looking at the bills and creating bills and paying the bills, then you can make them have that access here. And what you'll do is you'll basically, sorry, I'm going to click the PowerPoint. You'll basically put in their email here, and then they will get an email inviting them to be a user. And then from there, they can set up their own password within QuickBooks Online. So you don't need to know their credentials. They don't need to know yours. And then they have their own separate login in order to access the QuickBooks Online file. And then after setting up the users, a good next step after that would be setting up what in QuickBooks Online, they call it lists, which is your chart of accounts is in there, your products and services are in there, those locations and classes we talked about earlier, if you're doing those are in there. So there's a lot of stuff in your list. And in order to access that, again, in this gear icon right here, you can go right here under all lists. And again here, so you'll see your chart of accounts, your recurring transactions, products and services, and we'll go through this more in detail later on of each or most of these. But one of the things you're going to want to set up if you're setting up an account for the first time would be these products and services. So there's a lot of them already set up in here in the sample file. You can hit new here. If you have the plus, it'll give you the option to do inventory. But if you have just the essentials version, then you're just going to be able to do the services. And setting these up, so you link it to a chart of account sales account, and you do that in this income account right here. So there's kind of 2 different ways that you can track your sales. So let's say that, to keep it simplified, let's say that you're tracking your service. You have one service and one product that you sell. So you can either go into your chart of accounts and set up, so under the income here, so you can either set up a inventory sales, and service sales account, and then you can link those whenever you're creating those products and services. You can link those right here. So service, that service sales account that we just created, you can link it here in the income account. And then the same thing for when you have the inventory sales. Or if you prefer, you can just have an overall sales account and link both to that overall sales account. And this might seem confusing right now, but it depends on what level of reporting that you need. So if you just run a basic profit and loss report, and all you care about when you're running the profit and loss is your overall sales, then you can just create an overall sales account in your chart of accounts, and then you can link all of your products and services to those sales. And if you wanted to know more detail, if you wanted to know which products and services were making a certain amount of money, there's a separate report for that. Under the sales, you'll see a sales by product service summary, and you'll be able to run that separate report. And there you'll be able to see, out of all those products and services that you have, how much, like the net amount that you sold, how the percentage of it to the total sales. So it really depends on if you want on your P&L just an overall sales, or if you want to break down a little bit those sales a little bit more, you can do that as well. So let's go back into that. Another really important thing whenever you're setting up your products and services is to make sure that you're marking it as either taxable or non-taxable. That's going to be very important moving forward when running those reports to do your sales tax. But other than that, relatively straightforward. You put the name of the product or the service. You can do a category if you'd like to do that. If you have those classes set up, you can assign it here. And then again, you can all link it back to one overall sales account, or you can kind of break that down a little bit.
Gunnar, real quick, Sylvia's
Yes.
asking, if you start with the essentials, is it easy to upgrade to Plus if you need to?
It is, yes. So it's not as easy to downgrade, but they make it very easy to upgrade, of course. But so if you, so again, whenever you go into your account and settings, usually it's not here in the sample. Usually there's a billing and subscription option right here, and you'll be able to go in and see your billing and subscription, and then you'll be going and make changes and be able to upgrade to Plus right there.
Okay. Perfect.
And then I also believe too, you may be able to, if you hit this gear icon, there's under your profile, there's called an Intuit account, to where you can go into your Intuit account. I believe you might be able to do it there as well. But I know definitely under here in your account and settings, there's a billing and subscriptions, and you should be able to make the upgrade there.
Perfect.
Okay, let's see. All right, so yeah, so at this point, I can kind of go over kind of the overall kind of navigation of where things are in QuickBooks Online. So I know I was kind of just like shooting through things there, but this is like once everything's kind of set up on where everything is here. So I would say the main places that you're going to be doing stuff here is going to be first in this new button right here in the top left. If you want to do an action, if you want to create an invoice, create a bill, create a receive payment, create a bank deposit, anything like that, you're going to be clicking on this new right here. And so they have it listed as like customers, which is kind of the sales side of things, vendors, which is kind of the AP side of things. And then there's some miscellaneous stuff here. There is a show less option here. So if all you're really doing is doing invoices and estimates, then you can have that. So it's just to simplify things. But here's where you can create, again, invoices, estimates, sales receipts, bills, things like that. And I'll go through a little bit later on here. I'll go through kind of what each of these actually does and what they mean. But just so you know that this is where this stuff, if you want to do a bank deposit or a transfer between two accounts, if you want to do a journal entry, this is where everything is here in this top left new button right here. As you've seen already, there's some stuff here in this gear icon. I would say mainly what you're going to be looking at most is going to be probably your lists. So the gear icon here, and then all lists. Also, a place where you'll be looking at probably pretty often will be in your chart of accounts. Your chart of accounts can also be found under either right here, your chart of accounts and the gear icon, or if you go to all lists, there's chart of accounts right there. That's a really great thing about QuickBooks Online, is that there's, for everywhere that you want to go, there's probably at least 2 or 3 different ways to get to the same place. So they make it really, so if you don't have to just memorize one place to find something, usually you can find it in multiple different places. And then here we'll go on this left panel right here. So here, as you see, there's banking, expenses, sales. So with these arrows here, if you just click on this is for all of them. If you just click on the banking screen, you'll see banking, rules, and receipts. If you go to the arrow, you'll see banking, rules, and receipts. It's same for expenses. So here, when you hover over it, you'll see expenses and vendors. If you just click on it, here you'll see expenses and vendors. Same with sales. Overview all sales invoices. Same thing here. So it may seem like a lot at first, but once you get used to it, everything is really, really easy to find. So the dashboard, it's just kind of the first screen you go on. I don't really do too much in here. You can change these to where it'll show you overall information like your expenses, invoices, and you can change if you want to make it for the year, for the month. I don't do too much on the dashboard, but just know that that's there. The banking, this is where you get into your bank feed. If you want to create any rules, we can get into this a little bit later. If you want to create any rules, you can do that there. And then if you want to do receipt tracking within QuickBooks Online, this is where you would find that. Just really quickly, you can set up a customized email to send your receipts to if you're getting them emailed to you. And then, or you can, if you have the app, I can go through the app a little bit later as well. If you have the app, you can take a picture of the receipt and it automatically shoots it into this, this screen right here. And then what it does is when you're entering expenses through, or through your bank feed or through here, if you enter expense here, it'll automatically read your receipt and try to match it up. So if you have an expense for FedEx for $50 on this date, it'll read the receipt and find that information. It'll find FedEx on this date for $50. And then it'll say, I think this receipt is for this expense. And then you would match it on this screen. And then that receipt will always be attached to that expense. So if 2 years later you're getting audited, and then it's really easy because you can just look up all those expenses and all those receipts are attached to it automatically. And then here's where just a list of your expenses are, and then your vendors list right here. It's a great way to look up vendors and to see if you have an open balance with them. And then this bar right here is really great. So you can see, it's kind of like for your bills, you can see how many overdue bills you have and for what amount. You can see how many were paid in the past 30 days. You can see open bills. If you have any purchase orders, you can see that as well. So this bar here is really easy. So if you just want to see your overdue bills really quickly, you can just go into your vendors right here and then click on this overdue bar right here. And then you'll see all the overdue bills and you can make a payment from there. So for the sales screen, this is where I look to see, usually I go to invoices here to see kind of your open invoices. This is where you would see that. So again, you go to sales and then invoices, and then you can kind of filter them through here, but you can see which ones are open, which ones are past due. It tells you how much they're past due. If you got a payment, if you got a payment on a receipt, you can either just hit new and then receive payment, or you can look in your invoices right here and then receive payment through this screen right here. We're not going to get too much in the projects. It's a little bit more advanced. It'll take me a long time to go through that, but just know that that is an option in QuickBooks Online. So you can track with the particular product or a particular project or a particular customer, the income, expenses, how many billable hours, and everything like that per project. rather than just like running it into your overall P&L report. This is where your payroll stuff is. If you choose to do payroll through Intuit, this is where your reports are. We can get into reports a little bit later, dive a little bit deeper. The taxes screen that I mentioned earlier. Mileage, so you can track your mileage through QuickBooks Online. If you have the app, you can set it up to where it automatically tracks your location through the app. So it'll show all of your drives here. So if you drive 10 miles to a certain place, it'll say you drove 10 miles from here to here. And then you can go through and choose whether it's business or personal if you use one vehicle for both. And then for the business, you can just quickly type in the reason, like a meeting with so-and-so. If you don't like the idea of them tracking your location, you can manually add trips as well. So you can put the date here. And then if you don't know the distance, you can put the starting and ending point, and then it'll automatically calculate the distance for you. And then you can, again, mark it as business and then add the description there. It's a really great way to make sure you're keeping track of that to get as many tax deductions as possible. And this is where, again, another screen where you can see your chart of accounts. There's a few ways to get there. Again, with the gear icon is one of them, but in the accounting here, you can see your chart of accounts, or this is where you can start in the reconciliation process, which we'll go over in a bit. The chart of accounts, it's really important. It's kind of the buckets when you're putting in all these expenses and everything like that. The chart of accounts is basically the buckets of where everything is going. So if you're moving over from Excel or desktop, well, desktop, you can do a whole conversion from desktop to QuickBooks Online, and that will include your chart of accounts. If you're using something like Excel, then you can import a list of your chart of accounts into QuickBooks Online, which is a great feature. If you're manually doing chart of accounts, then you can do all of that through here in this new right here. I would say if you don't really know what chart of accounts to do, at least for your expenses, you can look at your whatever tax form you're filing at the end of the year. So let's say it's a Schedule C, for example. So you can go through and you'll be able to see exactly for the expenses at the end of the year where you're going to need to be tracking. So that's a great way to make sure that within your chart of accounts, all of these are accounted for, just to make it as easy and as possible come year end. So you can look here, for example, and see, okay, I need to track car and truck expenses. So a good idea. So if you want to just track auto expenses, then of course you can just make an account right here, expenses, then just name it auto expenses. You don't have to worry too much about the detail. This doesn't really affect much, but if you want to, there's the detail as well. But so you can create an auto account that tracks the expenses. And if that's all the report, like the tracking that you need for reporting purposes, then you're fine. But if you would like to know how much gas is that in the total expenses for the auto, how much of that was in repairs, how much was that in parking tolls, then you can create what's called sub accounts. So in order to do that, again, you would hit new here, auto expense. And let's say you want one that's tracking gas. Right here, you can check this box for is sub account, and then you can look up that auto expense that we just created. And then if you hit this down over here, rather than closing it, if you have a few of these, so if you want to track gas and then repairs, you can hit save and new. And then it'll bring everything up the same. And then you can change the name to repairs, is sub account, auto, save and close. So then whenever you see in your chart of accounts that auto expense, it'll be sub accounts of gas and repairs. And so whenever you go to do your taxes at the end of the year, you'll be able to see just the overall expenses right here. And then throughout the year, if it's useful for you to know, break it down a little bit, gas and repairs, and you can do that as well. And this is how it will show up on your profit and loss report. So we can go ahead and so like here, for example, this is one where there's the overall account and then there's a sub account. So this is how it shows up in your profit and loss. So you have the legal and professional fees, and then it kind of breaks it down: accounting, bookkeeper, lawyer. And so you can see that month to month, which is very, I think, very useful.
Hey, Gunnar, real quick, I think you
Yes.
touched on this briefly, but Abby's wondering if it's possible, I think you said this, you can transition from desktop to online. Is
Correct.
that the easy thing to do, or?
Yeah, if everything goes smooth, one way, I've done it a few times and usually it has gone smooth, but so there is a feature to do that. I can't show too much here because a lot of it's done on the desktop side of things, but you can do right here. If you go into this gear icon, you can do import desktop data. And essentially what happens is you want to back up, of course, your desktop data first. And then I recommend running a P&L and then a balance sheet report in order to verify once the conversion is completed that everything came over smoothly. So if you have differences in the profit and loss and balance sheet, then that's when you can start to try to figure out what went wrong. But so, and then you can do this import desktop data right here. So what you essentially do is the desktop side of things, you do, I think it's export to QuickBooks Online option. And then you can create a QuickBooks Online account first where you have your credentials, and then it'll ask you on the desktop side of things to put in your credentials, and then it'll automatically link the two and then send all the data over into QuickBooks Online. Okay. Usually takes about 30 minutes or so, and they'll send you an email once everything's complete. And then once that's done, then you can go back into your report screen right here, run the same profit and loss and balance sheet, and make sure that those numbers match up. Okay. But yeah, it'll bring over all of your open invoices. It'll bring over your chart of accounts. It'll bring over all of your past expenses and everything. So the only steps once the conversion is complete is at the beginning, how I was saying, like setting up your bank account, things like that. You'd want to go ahead and do that.
Okay. And then another quick question. Can you have multiple entities under one QuickBooks portal? For example, if you need to run a P&L for different properties.
Yes, you can. So if it's actually different businesses, sometimes that can get a little bit messy. I know some people try to do that, but if it's different, locations, different entities, you can do that through the locations and classes tracking. And that's available only, again, in the plus and advanced subscription levels. It's not available in the essentials. Okay. But and you can set those up here. So first, you'd have to set it up at the beginning. When I went through the settings, you want to check those boxes to track classes and locations. And once those are checked, you'll see them right here. So here's the classes, here's the locations. So this is where you can go in and set up new locations. So, and again, you can make sub-locations the same as the chart accounts, but location A. So I'm just going to quickly make location A and location B. And then what you can do, and this can be one of your saved reports, is so let's say you're tracking two different locations. When you can run just an overall profit and loss, which is for the whole entity, or you can run a profit and loss report by location. Mm-hmm. And you can save this so you can, and then that'll show, let's see. There's no data because there's no actual expenses or anything associated with those accounts I just created. But usually it would just have the total right here and then location A, location B, location C. Okay. So there is ways to track different locations and different entities all within the same parent QuickBooks Online account.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. As I can go through really quickly, what you can do here in this this new screen here. So here's what, of course, we can create an invoice. That's relatively straightforward. So that is a posting transaction. What I mean by that is whenever you create an invoice, it increases your receivables for the month if you are accounting everything accrual. And I recommend tracking everything accrual versus cash no matter what. Even if you file your taxes on a cash basis, you can always just run reports at the end of the year as cash. But tracking everything accrual really helps with cash flow analysis, things like that. And what that means is you'll track your receivable once the invoice is put in the system, not whenever you actually receive the payment. Same with bills. So once the bill is created, even if it's due 30 days from now, it'll show up as an expense due in 30 days versus waiting until you actually make the bill payment and it hits your bank feed. So it's really better to track throughout the month, especially if you're tracking cash flow that way. So here's where you do that with the invoices. You can receive a payment here. Here's where you can do an estimate. This is not a posting. So if you create an estimate for a customer, let's say $1,000 has been accepted to do work for the next 3 months, that doesn't hit your books and your reports at all. It's just a way to track. Once you create those invoices off of the estimate, that's when it starts posting stuff to your reports. Credit memo is if someone returns something. If you sell them something, then later on you return it. Sales receipt is that invoice is for if you want to receive payment. So you create an invoice in 15 days, you're going to receive payment off of that. A sales receipt is if they're paying you right there on the spot. So if you need to quickly bill them for $100 worth of work and they're going to give you a credit card, this is where you do that right here as a sales receipt. These are a little bit more advanced, but delayed credit and charges. These are basically reminders and they're not posting accounts. So if you want to do a delayed charge, like say for example, I did 5 hours of work for this customer and I want to remember to add it to their invoice. If you only do invoices like once a month, you can do a delayed charge. And then once you go to create the invoice for that customer, it'll pop up and say, do you want to add this charge to this invoice? Here's kind of the same things, but on the vendor side, you can quickly add an expense. If you write a check to somebody for any reason, you can add that here. If you receive a bill in the mail or anything like that, you can add it here. You can pay bills off of this screen. This is if you're doing inventory with the purchase orders. If a vendor, for whatever reason, offers you a credit, you can do that here. Bank deposits you can do here. And I think this is pretty important. So I'm going to quickly go over bank deposits off the banking screen. So the way QuickBooks Online works is that whenever you're going through your banking screen here, you can either add or match transactions that have already been inputted into QuickBooks Online. But let's say, for example, that you create an invoice. Let's say during one day, you release 3 invoices, one each for $50. One of them paid you cash, 2 of them paid you with a check. Whenever you're receiving those payments, you want to make sure that they're being put into undeposited funds. And you'll see that option right here, undeposited funds. And then let's say at the end of the day, you take that $150 and you bring it to the bank. That is when you want to go into this new option here and add it as a bank deposit. So you'll add it as a bank deposit at the end of the day. From undeposited funds, you can add in, so undeposited funds here. That's for the customer, undeposited funds. And you'll add the $50 cash and then each $50 check. And the reason for that is if you're receiving payments in cash and check and you're marking it going to your bank account throughout the day, whenever it hits your bank feed, it's going to show it. The bank feed is what hits your bank. So it's going to show up as a $150 deposit for that day. And it's not great at matching up all of those individual $50 transactions. So that's what's very important about undeposited funds, and then making that bulk bank deposit so that whenever it shows up on your bank feed, it'll be able to match it up, and then you can just match it here. Another thing off the bank feed, there's kind of 2 different ways to track everything within QuickBooks Online. So you can either, as you go along, add bills, add invoices, add received payments. And again, that's recommended for that cash flow tracking. And then if you're doing it that way, a lot of stuff in your bank feed is going to be a match because it's already going to see that stuff within the system. If you wanted to, if all you care about is the reports at the end of the month and you don't care about tracking throughout the month, bills, expenses, anything like that, you can mostly do all of your accounting just off of the bank feed. So you can just go through and find expenses, things like that. You can go through and add it to your books from the bank feed. So right here, for example, we didn't put the expense in before. So you can just click here. You can change or add a payee, the category of the expense, you can choose here, and then you can go ahead and add it to your books. So again, if all you care about is the month end reports, you don't care about cash flow or anything like that, you can basically do almost everything just off of this banking screen here. Let's see what else. Generally, I recommend any sort of expense, I recommend adding a payee. It doesn't matter if you can have a million payees here, it doesn't really matter. And you can quickly just add one. If you don't want to add every single, like if you don't want to add Exxon and Conoco or whatever for gas, you can just make one that's gas overall. But the reason I recommend always adding a payee, so let's say you're running reports, even for like tax reasons or anything like that. And another great thing, again, about QuickBooks Online is that everything's clickable. So if you're running a report and you see, you know, advertising expenses here, there's always a link to it. And you can click on that link and it'll break down and show you all the transactions that make up that number. But if you have a big list of different expenses and you don't have any of the payee name here, it can get really messy. So let's say, for example, you're just tracking utilities and then it comes tax time and you need to know how much of that was a phone bill and how much of that was electric. If you don't have any payees, you're just going to see a big list of transactions that are just utilities. But if you have the payees there, and you can kind of like see which ones are Verizon or which ones are, you know, Excel Energy or anything like that. And then you can easily kind of find that information. So kind of for your month-to-month bookkeeping, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff. So you want to make sure that your banking feeds and your credit card feeds are up to date for at least the month. So everything's reviewed. And then you're going to do a reconciliation, which you can find that here. And what a reconciliation is it's tracking everything that is in your QuickBooks Online associated with that account, whether it's your checking account or your savings account, and then matches it to your actual bank deposit. So it's a way to basically just audit to make sure that things are correct or incorrect within your QuickBooks Online file. So what you're gonna wanna do for this is grab your bank statement. And one quick little tip here, if you like to stay paper free, which I like to do, you can get Adobe, and it's free, and you can open up the PDF through Adobe, and then there's a highlighter feature. So you can kind of put the two screens side by side and go through and highlight each transaction that's reviewed on QuickBooks Online on your bank statement, just to see if you get everything without having to actually print out the bank deposit. But just really quickly, don't have much time to really dive too quickly into this, but what your goal is to have a $0 difference right here. Sometimes you can just have everything checked and it automatically has a $0 difference, which is great. Then you can just mark it as reconciled and you're good to go. A lot of times what will happen is, let's say for you're writing a check, for example, it's at like near the end of the month, that check will show up here because it's a transaction between your QuickBooks Online for that month for that bank account. But if it didn't hit your statement yet on your bank statement, then you can just leave it as unchecked because it actually hasn't cleared your bank yet. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Okay. There is a report that you can quickly see your reconciliation summaries. So you can see if you just want to quickly see which accounts need reconciled, when they were last reconciled, things like that, you can find that report here. I can go over the reports really quickly, kind of what's available. One thing to keep in mind with QuickBooks Online, it automatically balances your balance sheet, but it does so with this opening balance equity account. So this should be 0 for the most part. So if you're wondering if your balance sheet is correct, I would say the first thing to check is to see if you have anything in your opening balance equity here. Because if you do, then there's probably something wrong within your balance sheet. Let's see what else. So in your report screen here, you can see all the available reports. And then if you just star them, any ones that are important to you, they'll show up here in your favorites. And again, if you wanted to, you can run it and then bookmark it so they're up here. But all of these reports are very customizable. So let's say if you're tracking classes, you can run like a profit and loss report, for example, and then you can sort it by the classes. You can sort it by locations. You can run it as accrual or cash. And then anytime you make any of these changes, then you can save the customization, give it a customized name. And then when you go to look at your reports, you'll see it here in these custom reports. One cool feature, if you're working in a kind of an office environment and then you're giving these reports to somebody, to a manager, for example, I'd recommend probably setting up these management reports here. So if you just run a profit and loss, for example, export it to a PDF, this is what it'll look like right here. It has all the information, but it doesn't look very clean. It doesn't have your logo or anything. And you'd have to do this. So let's say, for example, someone is wanting the profit and loss, balance sheet, and then statement of cash flows for the month. What you can do is go over here to management reports, and then you can edit this report. So you can change how it looks, where to add your logo, what it says on it, and then you can change the reports. So right here, it'll say, let's say we want profit and loss for last month, balance sheet for last month, and then you can add a report here for a statement of cash flows. So, and then whenever you're done with your bank feed reviews and you're reconciled and everything and ready to send these reports, then all you have to do is go to management reports here. You can change this to last month. I'm just going to export this PDF so you can see it, but you can send it straight from here. But it's a much cleaner and more professional looking, and usually you'll have the logo here and you can make a little statement here. It has a little table of contents, and then it will go through and it'll have your profit and loss. You can scroll down, it'll have the balance sheet and the statement of cash flows. And you can also set up schedules to automatically, so you can set it up to where it's on the 7th of the month, it'll automatically send this report to a certain email address every month. So you can set up kind of schedules for that as well. So running out of time here, but just be aware too, one of the best things about QuickBooks Online is the number of apps that are out there available that you can integrate within QuickBooks Online. For example, I don't think QuickBooks Online does a good job of tracking inventory. So if you're used to using desktop and you have a lot of different SKUs, I would not recommend tracking inventory within QuickBooks Online. It's just not set up for that. There's no barcode scanner, anything like that. If you have 10 different products, QuickBooks Online will work just fine. But there's a bunch of different apps out there that you can use to track your inventory and then automatically integrate it into QuickBooks Online. Same with time tracking, same with payroll. There's Bill.com is a great one if you want to have a more involved system with paying a lot of bills automatically. You can use Bill.com. Receipt Bank's one if you want a more integrated system of receipt tracking, you can do that as well. There's also an app that I mentioned before, QuickBooks Online, where you can invoice customers on the fly. You can take credit card payments on the fly. You can also do that mileage tracking with your car. So yeah, so I guess I can open it up. If anyone has any last minute questions, I would love to answer those.
And you guys could just start asking if you want, or you can put your questions in the chat, either way.
Hi, this is Susan. I had a question. When I open up my QuickBooks Online, the screen comes up and it says, if you want to run this faster, do it here, like on your desktop. So I kind of have this desktop version too. What's the difference between the two?
It sounds like they want you to just get the app version. It's all the same thing, but yeah, I probably would just stick with Chrome if you had the option. Because they used to say that for me as well, where they just wanted me to download the app, and it's not. It's still a cloud-based system. It's just using the app, so it's not technically a desktop system in any way. But if you could, I would just probably stick with Google Chrome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Gunnar? And we did record this session, so I will send the recording out to everyone who attended. And I will include Gunnar's his contact information in that email. So if you do have more questions or you want to set up a time to meet with Gunnar, we'll do it that way as well.
Yeah, guys, thank you very much. And yeah, if I didn't have a lot of time to really get into like the details of like actually doing different invoices and everything. So if you have more specific questions that might be more involved, you can let me know and I'd love to walk you through them.
Great.